And we are live. So go ahead, Dick.
Hey, great. Hi. So I'm Dr. Dick Walker. I think a lot of you probably have seen me on a webinar somewhere or recording. And we are filling in tonight for the other folks who are at a meeting, gathering down here in Texas for Asea. So we're going to just kind of tell our stories and answer questions that you might put in the chat and just kind of discuss some topics that oftentimes people would like to be a little bit more aware of. And most of you have heard my story. So what I'm going to do is, and I can come back and tell it if Lee thinks it's worth telling again, but what I'd like to do is introduce Chuck Grijalva, who is one of our up and coming leaders and very active in Asea and working really hard to put together a business and has a very, very profound product story. So Chuck, why don't you introduce yourself and why you got involved in Asea, what you see going on here, and what it's done for you, and just kind of a general tell your story and let people know who you are and why you're here.
Absolutely, Dr. Walker. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Osler, for inviting me to come on.
You're welcome. We're glad to have you.
I got started. My background is I'm a respiratory therapist. I've been one for about 30 years. I've got a pretty extensive health history with some lung problems that caused a heart problem and has led to a brain problem, which causes some weakness on my right side and some spasticity. And fortunately, I worked with a very persistent RN who introduced me to Asea about 7.5 years ago. And I met Dr. Walker back then, way back in the old days when he was just a gold. And he was given one of his first presentations in the Tri-Cities. The science really wasn't compelling back then. But Catherine was very persistent. And fortunately for me, I went ahead and just got on Asea just kind of to get her off my back. And lo and behold, I started having some small increments where the joint pain was gone, had a little more energy, brain fog was cleared up. But I wasn't necessarily convinced it was worth the expense. And so for about 1.5 years, I played on and off with taking Asea. And during that time, I was diagnosed with a mass on my tongue that required surgical intervention. And that's why you'll notice that I'm speaking not necessarily clearly, because half of my tongue is actually gone from that surgery. And it was done at the University of Washington Medical Center. And because of my underlying health conditions, they said I was going to be there for 8 days. I developed several complications, and long story short, was there for 64 days. I got home, I was dejected, no energy. I had, at that time, young daughters at 5 and 10. I was not able to participate in their life at all. I was able to walk from my bedroom to the couch, and that was pretty much it. My wife had gone back to work, and I was home alone and noticed that I had several cases of Asea in my bathroom. So I'm like, nothing else is working. I know this stuff is perfectly safe. Let's see what happens if I put this stuff up my feeding tube. Because at the time, my wounds weren't healing. 30 days later, the wound pump that was on my gallbladder incision that was infected was gone. 60 days later, my feeding pump was gone. 90 days later, I'm back fishing with my girls again. And I actually was able to participate in life. We were actually able to go and do things, albeit it was a slow progress. But I was back on the road to recovery. Fast forward about 1.5 years, and we were down in Salt Lake at our first global convention. And they had unrolled the genetic study. And my wife being a nurse and me being a respiratory therapist, we're thinking, gosh, I wonder what would happen if I bumped up from 8 ounces to 12 ounces. because of that one spot in there that talked about the inflammatory pathway that it affected. And I was able to come off of 3 different pain medications within 30 days. Since then, I'm off 11 different medications. And so it's not, like Dr. Walker has said multiple times, it's not a matter of if Asea will work. It's how much and for how long. And I can unequivocally say that I would not be here talking to any one of you if it hadn't been for Asea. Asea has saved my life, but it actually gave me my life back. Because I was forced to retire as a respiratory therapist, not able to work in the hospital anymore. I get to make a difference in people's lives again. And what I think is probably a more profound difference than I ever did learning the life support equipment in the intensive care units. And so, you know, I think we have a moral obligation to share these amazing molecules with everybody and anybody you can actually talk to. So that's kind of my story. A little bit longer than the 3-minute we're supposed to do, but I've got a lot to say.
No, that was fantastic, Chuck. I mean, it's hard to imagine, you know, being in that position, and it might be a good point in time here for the audience to hear us make the official disclaimer that notwithstanding all other things being equal, this is not a diagnosis, a cure. It's not a solution to make medical claims or to treat diseases. That's not what this is. This is a supplement, and we'll get into a little bit more about maybe how this came to be here in a few minutes, because I think there's some valuable information to give context to, you know, how this was. Chuck, just in follow-up, you were, you know, laid up, laid away, whatever, for all that time, but you came back and you said you had cases of Asea there. Weren't you taking it during that time that you were under intensive care?
No, I wasn't. Like I said, I was in the hospital for 64 days. And probably the smartest thing I ever did was not turn my auto ship off.
So it was just piling up at home.
It was coming to the house while I was in across the state in the hospital. And I had a couple of cases of it sitting there, several cases sitting there waiting for me when I got back. And so I was able to play with the higher doses and find out what my ideal dose was. And so I would recommend that to everybody, because, you know, my wife's ideal dose is 8 ounces. My mom's is 6. Play with it until you find out what's best for you.
But you said you had a feeding tube, and this was because of the surgery in your mouth.
Correct. Yeah, I developed a fistula, or a hole from the bottom of my mouth that leaked out my neck, and that wasn't healing. And so if I was to take a drink of water, it would just run down my chest. Okay. And so that was why I had a feeding tube, because I wasn't able to adequately take nutrition or hydration orally.
And that remained in place after you was discharged. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. They expected me to have that for 6 to 8 months, and I had it for 60 days after I got home.
I think this is one of the more unique stories, because we're all talking about, you know, putting it in our mouth and nose and or skin, and you found a different way to take it. Exactly.
But what's unique about that 60-day mark is I had to be on food and drink for 30 days prior to them removing the feeding tube to make sure I was able to maintain my weight and health. And so theoretically, it was healed and up in 30 days to eat and drink. So the 60 days was just when the feeding tube was removed. And so that's pretty remarkable. I know my wife is a nurse, and she was the one doing my wound changes. And quite frankly, after her spending 64 days on a cot next to me at the University of Washington, I wasn't going to tell her I was doing Asea. But later on, once we found out it was working really well, I fessed up to her, and she's like, I couldn't figure out what was going on. All of a sudden, you started healing at remarkable speeds. When for the last, at that time, 90 days, we've been sitting there watching you not heal at all. And just, I knew something changed. I just didn't know what it was. And, you know, in hindsight, I believe myself that it was Asea.
Let's kick this over to Dr. Dick. Could you give some context to that for us? And because I'm sure there's some people that will listen to this now or later who are wondering, well, why would it have this kind of an effect? What's going on with the science side from a physiology point of view that might explain, you know, these kind of typical results?
Yeah, before we go there, Chuck, you know, Chuck alluded to the fact that, you know, before he had the mass on his tongue and spent 60 some days at the University of Washington having that taken care of, he had been retired from disability from a lung problem that was so serious that he just couldn't work in the hospital. And it was one of those lung problems that wasn't going to go away. It wasn't going to get any better. It was going to get progressive. It eventually affected his heart. And yet, you didn't tell the end of that story yet, Chuck. So let's hear what happened there, because I'm as impressed with that as I am. And then I'll kind of explain why, you know, you, I think, had the results that you've gotten. Thank goodness you saw the light and started taking this and took it regularly. But, you know, with all that scarring and stuff that was going on in your lungs, how's that doing? You know, because you shared some information with me a month or two back after some follow-up tests that you had done that was pretty darn phenomenal.
I was diagnosed with a heart problem that the average life expectancy is 3 to 5 years. That was 15 years ago. And there was pressures in my heart that were well above normal. And I went in and had some repeat studies done this summer. All of those numbers are back to normal, within normal limits. And that was my pulmonologist at the university is one of the leading researchers in the world in this particular diagnosis I have, and he was just absolutely amazed. I actually brought up Asea to him, and he's looking through it, and he's like, "This has all the right stuff. We just need more documentation before I can actually recommend it to others. You keep doing it," is what he recommended.
So, you know, that's just an example of how when one system in your body fails, it causes problems in the other, because the heart problems, if I'm right, were a problem that was brought on by the lung problems, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So one thing led to another, and so for the heart issues to improve, that means that the lung issues have improved, and that's another condition that does not ordinarily reverse itself. And so Asea is an amazing product, because what it does, as best we can tell, and full disclosure here, we don't know exactly how Asea works, and it doesn't just work in one way. It's a foundational health product, and the reason that people can their bodies can resolve and improve so many different things is that these molecules work at that foundational level of cellular health. And what we do know about redox signaling molecules, and Asea is redox signaling molecules, they're made in your body naturally. You wouldn't be alive without them. But and the research is showing us that redox signaling molecules are very much involved in recognizing when there's damage to a cell, recognizing when there's a problem, and then facilitating the self-repair mechanisms that are built into cellular physiology. Our bodies have an amazing ability to fix and repair at that cellular level if we just give it the right tools, and redox signaling molecules are one of the very important ingredients in that. And if we have enough of them, our body can do the job that it's meant to do, and we don't even know they're there, that they're working 24/7 to make sure that any cellular damage that occurs gets fixed, But when we get behind on that repair, it's just like with your automobile. If you don't take it in, don't change the oil, don't change the air filters, don't do minor repairs when they show up, before long you're looking at replacing the engine or replacing the transmission, which is a major issue. And our bodies work the same way. If we can stay on top of the cellular health and stay on top of those really hour by hour changes sometimes that are happening, our body knows how to fix those things, as long as it has ample redox signaling molecules, ample nutrition, some of the other things that I know Lee wants us to get into when we talk about overall health and wellness, because it isn't so much that Asea Redox fixes something. Asea Redox gets your health and wellness to the point where that whole system is what comes together to start to repair your body, especially if you've allowed it to get to the point where you've got multiple problems.
So for those who maybe are new on the webinar, you've just been listening to Dr. Dick Walker. He's an emergency room physician in Spokane, Washington, or I guess now retired. And that puts two of you in that category, sort of. I'd like to go back to Chuck, and maybe we can go here first, and then cycle back to this idea of healthy lifestyle, because this is just one part of it. And people think that we have this thing in our society where if I take a pill, I'll get better. And really, it's not quite that simple usually. So maybe Chuck first, and then Dr. Dick. What is Chuck? You mentioned that you had stepped away, or you had to retire. How has this helped in that regard? How are you filling it in? Because this does have an opportunity side to it.
I didn't get involved with Asea to be a business builder. At best, I was going to build enough of a business to cover my product expense. Since then, I have realized that because of the gift I was given, and because somebody cared enough to share with me, I could do that with others and make a big impact. And I still wasn't necessarily wanting to be a big business builder until Jerry White explained to me, the more people you help, the bigger your check gets. And he's like, now, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to help people. And he's like, so you want to be filthy rich? And I'm like, well, I guess when you put it in that context, yes, I do. Because that's how many people I want to reach out to. And then I was able to kind of start digesting that and talking with my wife. And she's like, I think God saved you. Because you have people to help. And that's my mission now, is to help as many people as I can. And the money takes care of itself. And albeit Asea is very generous. So you can have a very comfortable life making a difference.
That's great. Dr. Dick, you've retired, as I understand, from active medical practice. What are you doing with all your time now, and how does this help fill that, and why?
Well, it was really my desire to have more time to do what I wanted to do instead of having to work all the time that attracted me to the Asea business. When I first was introduced to Asea, it was the technology that caught my attention, because unlike a lot of doctors, I've got a degree in preventive medicine. I've studied nutrition. I've studied, wellness and overall health and longevity. And, I've been an active athlete all my life. So I've always been interested in how can I get my body to work more effectively, more efficiently, and how can I push it as hard as I can, and then push it a little harder, but stay healthy. I used to climb mountains for fun. I mean, big mountains like Everest and McKinley. And, it's not healthy to be up at those extreme altitudes. You're really stressing your body out. So to combat that, you have to do everything else right. You have to keep your physiology as finely tuned as you can. And so I've always been interested in that. And when I saw what Asea claimed to be, I thought, wow, this is like a big missing piece for wellness and overall health. And so that's what really attracted me. But then what really got me, and I mean, I ordered the product as soon as I heard about it, started taking it, got my wife on it. She's had some wonderful results. But the business attracted me pretty quickly as well, because I realized that as effectively as this is, that it would be a no-brainer. Everybody on the planet could benefit from this. It's just a matter of finding the people that are interested in improving their health and using this as a tool. And so I knew that there was a heck of a business model here, because it's the only play in town. There's no other company that makes this technology. It's a breakthrough technology. It's wonderful. It can help so many different people recover from illness, but it can also help so many people to maintain their health so that they don't get to a point where they're talking about having to recover. And it can help athletes to improve their performance. And so it was like, if I can't build a business on this product, on this technology, then there's something wrong with me. And I realized that if I could do that, I could, instead of working 60 hours a week at the hospital, I would have a lot more freedom of time to do things around home, to do things with my wife, to climb more mountains, to bike ride more, and to do the things I really enjoy doing instead of working in the emergency room. And within a couple of years, I had matched my physician income with my Asea income. And at that point, I started to cut back hours. I was 64 when I started this, and I was getting kind of burned out on emergency medicine, but I couldn't afford to quit at that time because of mortgages, and we put 4 kids through college. And when you have those kinds of expenses, it takes a lot of money just to break even. And so once I had the additional income from Asea, and could cut back to more like a normal 40-hour week, emergency medicine got to be a lot more fun again. And so I continued to work for another few years before I actually decided to retire. And I've got even more time now to spend with my grandchild, to do the things I want to do. It's been confining because of this whole COVID thing. We haven't been able to travel as much as usual, but we're making a very good income, and we've got a lifestyle that ordinarily is associated with having to work a lot harder and spend a lot more time to earn that income. And so the combination of leverage and residual income and the beauty of this business plan really is ideal for any age group, but especially if you don't want to work 40 to 60 hours a week for the rest of your life and be too tired to enjoy the time that you have off, or if you want to take more vacations, or just do what you want to do. I tell people that with this business, instead of having to fit your life around your job, what you do in this business is that you fit your job around your life. So you fit your Asea business around whatever kind of life you want to live. And if that's traveling a lot, you can do it. All I need is a smartphone and a small computer to run my business. I can do that from the beach. I can do it from the, sitting beside a mountain stream. I can do it traveling the world. I can do it. I guess I could do it on my bicycle. I like to road bike a lot, but it would require putting a little bracket on my aero bars, and probably run off the road into a ditch if I was trying to do it while I was riding. But you can do this business anywhere. And it's just, like Chuck says, you're just helping people, reaching out, talking to people, sharing it, helping your team share it. And, it's every nickel you make is because somebody is benefiting by drinking the Asea, or putting the Renew on their body, or taking our Via nutritionals. So, it's just a great way. It's a wonderful way to earn a living, and what a living you can earn with this.
So what I'm hearing from both of you is the product experience that you each personally had is really what was the initial thing that kind of sucked you in to get your attention. But then, Dick, you made a comment that you began to look at this other thing. You talked about the business model. The question often comes up, it's like, why this business model? If this is good, why can't I get it somewhere else? Why did they choose this? Maybe you could go into that and give us a little history of the roots, where this came from and why this was the direction they chose.
You want me to answer that one?
Yeah, would you?
Yeah, sure. This product has been in R&D for probably 30 years, and it's been Asea for 10 years, and before that it was just in research and development. There was a small company in Utah called Medical Discoveries Inc., who was a research-based development company, working initially on a compound that they had found was very antimicrobial. It killed viruses and bacteria and fungus. And so this was before we even knew about redox signaling and the role of redox signaling molecules in health. They just knew that it was really good at killing bugs. And so they were developing a model where they made a machine that you could make this with, and you could sterilize dental and surgical instruments. And I guess anything else that you wanted a solution that would kill germs, kill bacteria. And then along came this whole scientific area called redox signaling. And they realized that they had actually created a solution that was redox signaling molecules. And then they had already done the safety studies, because anything that you put near a dental or surgical instrument has to be safe. And so they knew that it was perfectly harmless to people. They had never thought that it might be good for people until the study of redox came along. And then they started to look into it with regards to that. And then that little startup company, for financial reasons, management reasons, whatever, they went bankrupt. And along came Burtis Norton a year or two later, found this technology just sitting there, found the intellectual property sitting in a holding company. And by then, Burtis, who had come out of corporate America, retired, wealthy, got bored, and he went back into business in the biotech area and launched a couple of other products for other companies because he enjoyed doing it. I think Burtis just is a guy who loves business, loves doing things. And then he found out about this technology and said, "Oh my gosh, this is something that I can really do something with and create a legacy." And so he brought on some scientists, because the technology wasn't far enough advanced to actually commercialize it. The molecules weren't stable enough. And so they spent another year or so, led by Gary Samuelson, whose name most of you know, who figured out a way, a proprietary patented way to stabilize these molecules. The molecules that are made in your cells are only viable for a fraction of a second, millionths of a second, and then they're either used up or they decay back to their constituent atoms. Ours are good for about 3 to 3.5 hours once you open the bottle and consume them. They're good in the bottle for at least a year, so they're very stable in the bottle. So having stabilized them, they did some feasibility studies, some tests with people, realized people would take it, people would share it. And then I think they chose, network marketing because it's a brand new technology. It's a brand new product. It's not like they were marketing another form of a vitamin or another form of some other nutrient that people knew about. So you really had a big story to tell, and they realized that story could best be told word of mouth. And Burtis wasn't interested in a flash in the pan, go big real quick. He was interested in establishing a legacy company. And quite frankly, he was also interested in the financial lives of the people that would be involved. And he studied the network marketing business model, I think, as hard as he studied the scientific technology of Asea, because he came from corporate America. He did not come from the network marketing MLM side of things. He came from traditional corporate America. And he fell in love with network marketing as well as just another way to help people. And he knew where this technology was going to go long before anybody else did. He had the vision for what this could do for Chuck and me and everybody else that's using the technology. And he also had a vision for where the technology could take people financially if they chose to engage in that side of it. And you've all heard Tyler speak, and the respect that Asea, the company, has for those of us who are essentially the marketing arm of the company, those of us who are out in public sharing this. They have huge respect for us because they realize that we're as important a part of getting this out to the public and getting this out into the world and creating a successful business model. We're just as important as corporate is, because without us, there is no Asea, and without Asea, there is no us. And so it's just a wonderful partnership. And if anybody tries to disparage me about network marketing, I can convince them usually pretty quickly that it's a heck of a business model. And a couple of months ago, we were awarded membership in the $1 Million Club. And when somebody tells me, well, nobody ever makes money in network marketing, I said, well, that's really strange. Let me show you the certificate I got from Asea a couple of months ago. And it's all because we've helped other people like Chuck and other people in the business to make money. It's an elegantly fair and democratic business model, and it awards effort. It awards people who are doing the do and getting people on Asea. So it's all around, I think, the fairest, most ethical, and quite frankly, one of the most lucrative business models out there.
Yeah, it is. And, I've my own story there is in the early days when I was looking at this, not too long ago, the story that you recited just there, the genesis, and if people want to hear another rendition of that, you can go to the amazingmolecules.com website and click on the Genesis video. And there's about a 15-minute video vignette documenting that history that you were in part just talking about. As a health professional, my background is in dentistry. And I've been around the bases a few times and been in leadership in some professional organizations. And so I've had some experience in knowing how to do research and digging in to find out what's really going on behind the scenes. And that was part of my due diligence. Not only just traveling to Utah myself and speaking with the executive team and the developers, but really getting into the base science at PubMed and online resources and books and so forth to understand what the core science was, that, whether this was just a fly-by-night thing. And it's like, why, one of the big questions is, why haven't I heard about this before? Where have I been? And after my wife's physician, who I have to credit Chuck for bringing into this. It's interesting how we're all connected here, because my wife's physician recommended to us that we get her on redox signaling. And I remember looking at him sitting in that exam room with her. And I asked him, I said, what are redox signaling molecules? And he wouldn't tell me. He just said, and I think it was one of the biggest positive points, because he just said, go look it up. Well, I don't know that he knew who he was talking to, because I did. I went and I dug it out and figured it out, and I found my own sponsor. That's how committed, convinced I was of this. But it's that story of it coming from this research base, and it could have gone in any half dozen or a dozen different directions, but it didn't. And there's a reason. There's a Fortune 50 a corporate executive, strategic analyst person that made some really important decisions that put this in this path for network marketing, which now allows a very unique kind of leverage to those of you who are new at this or investigating and looking at this at any time. It's that leverage that makes this powerful. In a conventional marketplace, where we put money away in a investment vehicle, hoping to spend 20 or 30 years letting compound interest, grow it to a place where we can then step away and retire, hopefully comfortably. That's a legitimate, we'll call it business or retirement strategy, and I get that. We're all trying to do that. But what this model allows you to do is to vertically leverage yourself. And if people really want to accelerate or create an asset that has the equivalent value in terms of cash flow of sitting on something for 30 years so that it can finally grow to a point where it can sustain you, then you need to look at this, because that for me has become a very compelling reason why I maintain my interest in this. I mean, it's not just because of the science and the impact it's had on my life, in my health improvement and my back pain and the extension of my career at this point, but it's the realization that by helping others, I can vertically leverage myself and accelerate that. And that's become compelling for me. So I appreciate, Dick, you kind of going into that. Again, people go to the Genesis video at amazingmolecules.com.
You know, Lee, a really good way to drive that home. When I think it was after I was in the business for about 4 or 5 years. And I have a 401k, you know, IRA. I've always saved as much as I could, mostly to tax shelter, because I was in a high income bracket as an ER doc. You know, I could trade an hour for some of the higher pay scales as an ER physician. And so I always put away as much as I could, because otherwise I'd just pay it out in taxes. And here I've been saving the max I could for well over, you know, probably 30 years. And I sat down with my accountant, and we were looking at the Asea business, and I said to him, I said, you know, I'm thinking about retiring, because by then I was, you know, 69, something like that, 68. And I said, you know, if I were to take a draw out of my retirement plan and still have it actuarially last for as long as I'm expected to live, how much could I take out? And he said, well, let me look at the tables here. And he figures it out. And he writes a figure on a sticky note and he hands it to me. And I looked at that and laughed at him, because I said, I'm already making more than that every month in Asea by far. And here I've saved for years, you know, worked hard, put money aside, invested it, I think, fairly wisely. And that's all I can take out. And here, after 5 years in Asea, I was already making like 3 or 4 times that. Monthly, month after month, mostly residual. And that was when the power of this business model came home to me. I mean, I realized that was going on, but when I compared those two figures side by side, I thought, wow, this is better than I thought it was. So it is a heck of a way to build up residual income. And that's why so many people in network marketing, if they choose to, can retire. If they start at a younger age, can retire much earlier than, you know, their mid 60s, which is more typical in your typical job. So.
Right. And the point of that, and then I want to kick it over to Chuck. So Chuck, I'd like you in just a moment to put your 2 cents in on that. And then I want to circle back before we're done here and talk a little bit more about some of the base science. But the point of an asset equivalency is, if you had, and these are numbers off the top of my head, so I hope I'm still accurate, $5,000 a month residually dropping into your bank account, that's the same as having $1 million in the bank earning 6% interest. And so, and if you wanted 10,000 a month, that's $2 million in the bank earning 6% interest. It's just a mathematical equation. And so what Dr. Dick's talking about here is, you know, he didn't reveal his numbers, but we'll just say if he was already receiving $5,000 a month in residual income from this business venture, and doing so after, he said, 5 years or 2 years or 10 years, doesn't matter, that would be the same as if he had labored however long and set aside an additional or grew an additional $1 million and had it working at 6% interest. And the question becomes, given all the investment laws and the tax laws and so forth, how long would it take anyone to set aside or accumulate an additional $1 million from what they're doing right now, above and beyond their overheads or their living expenses and so forth from where they're sitting? And that concept is a really powerful concept, because once you understand the science, that how this works on the health and why it works on the health, and you have your own experience, then all of a sudden you have this different experience in the real life side of it, where it's like it's impacting my life in a financial way, which gives me that freedom. Chuck, I'm going to toss this back to you. If you could chip in and maybe you can give some color commentary there to some of those thoughts, because I know you've thought about those.
I have, and I think the vast majority of people in Asea aren't going to be 6-figure earners. And that's fine. I've had talks with some of the people in our team who, one lady in particular is a grandma, and she's strapped. She has a hard time paying for her Asea every month. And she's got several grandkids. And so we were doing a game plan interview with her. And we talked about how much money she wanted to earn and how we could get her to earn that much money. And her whole plan was to make enough money to be able to take her grandkids out for ice cream all at one time. And what was really neat about that was, and she said, you know what, and if this keeps going like it is, when I go to a restaurant, I can order from the left-hand side of the menu instead of looking at the prices on the right-hand side to decide what I want to get. And so this lady we were helping was 75 years old, and she was dreaming again. And I think that, on top of being able to generate possibly a comfortable income for someone, and that all varies as to what you guys think or personally think is comfortable. But for her, being able to take her grandkids out for ice cream all at once, and the thought of being able to dream again at 75, to me, that was pretty cool. I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking of the conversation with her. And that's pretty cool. And from a personal experience, having to retire at 45 because of health problems, I was making a very comfortable wage as a respiratory therapist, and that was gone pretty much overnight. Like I said, we had young girls at the time, 5 and 10. Thoughts creep into your mind of who's going to pay for their college? Who's going to pay for their weddings? My wife and I put ourselves through college, and we're still paying her student loans off 20 years later. I didn't want to strap my girls with that. But before Asea, I wasn't going to be much help. Things are looking much better now. And, those are some other things that I think that people need to look at is, you may not be a huge six-figure income earner, but it might be just enough to make you more comfortable and give your quality of life an improvement. And that to me is pretty remarkable.
That's a great way. I appreciate your explanation there.
And Lee, it's so easy to build a business to make those kinds of incomes. For anybody who wants to look at a more detailed explanation of that, in the last Super Saturday, I did about a 20-minute presentation on, show me the money, and I talked about residual income and the income disclosure statement. So that's on YouTube. I think it's on the Asea United. I was the second or third presenter in there, but you can tease that out and watch that. It's a kind of a detailed discussion about what we've been talking about for the last 10, 15 minutes.
So I'd like to come back to, we talked earlier about lifestyle. Asea is redox signaling molecules are essential. In fact, they're a native part of our physiology. And without them, disease happens. We can, whether it's Asea or not Asea, if your mitochondria are not functioning well enough to produce redox signaling molecules, which really are what activate all these gene pathways and signaling pathways in the cell. If that's not happening, then we're not well. But let's extend this just a little bit further, and let's talk about. I apologize for that. And let's talk about the nutritional side, some of the building block side, and what healthy living, this is synergistic. It's 1 + 1 is 3, in my view. Dick, could you start us off there and give us your thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been preaching wellness as a solution to sickness for 40 years, because even on the doctor side of things, when I write you a prescription it doesn't, you know, that's not so much a magic bullet. If everything else in your body wasn't working, the prescription isn't going to do you much good. If I write you a good example would be an antibiotic. If I write you an antibiotic for pneumonia or wound infection or something, all that's going to do is help out. But if your immune system is shot, you're still not going to maybe survive. You're still going to have a very rough time of it. So drugs are only a crutch, but oftentimes one that can really help you. But so what is wellness? I mean, wellness is multifaceted, but there are some major portions of it, some big pieces of it. And Asea Redox is turning out to be a big piece, but it isn't. Is it the most important piece? Probably not. It's a major piece for many people, and it's an important piece for all of us. But if you're not sleeping enough, you're not going to counteract the negatives of not sleeping enough. And you know, research into sleep was long delayed, but I've been listening to a bunch of that lately. And if you're not getting, on average, probably 8 hours, if you're trying to be like I was for years and saying, hey man, I can get by on 5, I don't need all that sleep. I probably did my damage some irreversible harm by doing that. And I make sure now that I get 8, sometimes 9 hours of sleep a night, because I know my body needs that to stay healthy. Exercise, I've always believed that exercise was important. You know, I probably over-exercised at times, but any amount of exercise is going to give benefit to your overall health plan. Drinking enough water is important, so hydration is important. And nutrition above and beyond Asea is very important. You know, there are essential and non-essential nutrients that you need to supply to your body, because the biochemistry that goes on in your body is quite complex. But there are certain things that and your body can make a lot of the chemical compounds that are essential for health, but there are certain ones that it can't, and those are what we call essential nutrients or essential vitamins. And then there are some non-essential ones that are very beneficial for you to get into your diet because they aid in enzymatic activity and just a lot of the, you know, the biochemical equations that take place to make your body work, because your bodies are a biochemical machine. And the chemistry of that is very complex. But if you're not putting in the right nutrients, the right ingredients to make things work efficiently, then what happens is you get disease. And many, if not most, maybe all diseases, except for a few that are primarily genetic, are lifestyle determined. Their diet, their lack of exercise, poor quality of sleep. And that all adds up to your body just not being able to compensate for all of those lacks and limitations. And it's amazing what can happen. I was just talking to a sleep researcher not long ago, and he said it's just amazing what can happen when you get people getting the right amount of sleep. And oftentimes that can work like magic. And so exercise can work magic for people. It doesn't mean you have to run 6 miles a day. You just need get out and move your body. And get your heart pumping and your you know, respiratory system working, and just you know, a medium amount of exercise can do wonders for your overall health as well. You're muted. And Asea has some wonderful nutritional. You know, I didn't get into the basics, but Source is awesome. They're whole food based, so it's got all the nitty gritty, all the essential stuff, but it's got all the other things that come along in whole food nutrition. The Life Max is amazing. It's got some very, what I would call leading edge, avant-garde sort of nutritional things in there with some of the mushroom products. And then the Biome is, where was I reading? Even with regard to COVID, gut biome can make a huge difference. I just read that just in the last couple of days that people with certain gut biomes do much better with COVID than people who don't pay attention to that. And so, you know, who would have thought that the bacteria growing in your gut would have a major survival benefit for a new virus that comes around? And I was, you know, it never ceases to amaze me when I come across you know, a scientific fact like that. But, you know, the more, you know, I tell people that your wellness, your health and wellness is like one of those 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles. We always do one of those at Christmas time. We set it out on the table and we go by and put a piece in now and then. And this year we did 2 of them because we were home so much. But I tell people your health is like that. And if you do jigsaw puzzles, if you know you get to the end and you think you're missing a piece or two, like you fell on the floor, you just feel like it's not complete. Well, your health isn't complete if you're missing pieces. And you want to put as many of those important pieces into your puzzle of your health, and amazing things will start to happen. And you know, the big pieces are sleep and nutrition and exercise and hydration and Asea. And you can't sacrifice any of those and expect to have the kind of health that you really want to have. And you know, a good lesson for those of you who are out there trying to help people with Asea is to understand that oftentimes if Asea doesn't seem to be working for them the way you think it should, maybe it isn't the Asea. Maybe you're asking the Asea to do too much. And maybe they're only sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, or maybe they're not getting any exercise, but they could, or maybe they're not drinking enough water, or maybe their underlying nutrition isn't very good. Maybe they're just eating sweet carbohydrate snacks all day long and not getting any good nutrition into their body. And if you can give them some advice along those lines, maybe get them to drink more water, get them to exercise a little bit, all of a sudden the redox molecules now have something to help them with, and they'll improve. So sometimes I think we're asking the redox molecules in and of themselves to do too much if we aren't paying attention to the other parts of wellness and lifestyle things.
I really appreciate you saying that. And here, as we start to get close to the end, you know, the whole part of this healthy lifestyle thing, the pillars of health are what you, pardon me, what you talked about is sleep, you know, exercise, nutrition, stress reduction. As a dentist, I'm going to throw in oral health.
Sure.
Because we're learning so much more about that as well. But the reason for all that is that all of these activities and these this dieting and the stress reduction, it's all biooxidative. They have a direct effect on the mitochondria. And so, you know, it's an interesting concept. If we challenge the idea of why does exercise and healthy diets and stress reduction and sleep, why do those make us healthier? Because we all accept that they do. That's a given. But why they work is because they have this direct effect on the mitochondria that makes it more efficient, more effective, which in turn produces more native redox signaling molecules, which in turn has more gene expression, including the NRF2 gene, which is the antioxidant gene that creates glutathione that helps with detoxification. So there's all these really intricate physiological pathways that are impacted by all these. Someone asked in the chat, what else? You know, like what I've been doing the last month is making my own bone broth, and we're sprouting, and I'm making kefir and yogurt. You know, this is all this gut health thing. And so if you bring all of this together and create this personal agenda, it starts to get kind of fun and exciting to rebuild your health, but you're doing it at the cellular level through so many mechanisms. Chuck, anything else you want to? We so appreciate you coming on to tell your story, and what a fantastic one. What would be your parting thought here?
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. You know, to just kind of reiterate what Dr. Walker said, the 4 things you need for cellular health: adequate sleep, proper hydration. Those 2 are easy enough to get alone. Smart supplementation, because nutrition may not be in our food now like it used to be.
Yep.
And adequate cellular communication. Up until recently, that was very difficult to get. Now through smart supplementation with Asea, we have an advantage of being able to do that. So I think now the four pillars of cellular health have never been easier for us to grasp. And fortunately, Asea is positioned to help dramatically in 2 of those areas. And so we're very fortunate.
Dick, what else would you have to say? We've got 2 or 3 minutes here, and then we're going to give it over to Stevie in Australia.
I'll put in a plug for the business model because, and if you watch that presentation I did on Saturday, I talk about that because what is the leading, and with regards to stress reduction, because stress, emotional stress leads to physical stress, and emotional stress by itself leads to increased cortisol levels, stress hormone levels, which leads you down a biochemical pathway to not good things, really bad things. And what is the leading cause of stress for most people and most families? It's the dollar bill. It's not having enough money at the end of the month. It's having bills left over after your checking account's empty. It's, I've heard for years that an extra $500-600 would have saved so many marriages and so many relationships, because couples tend to argue about money more than they argue about anything else. And so if you can build a business, even just a small to medium sized Asea business, and add a couple $100 extra a month to your financial income side of things, that can alleviate a huge amount of stress for many, many people. And so I think that, that's another big side of where Asea can help your overall health, is to alleviate to a significant degree one huge cause of stress in many people's and many families' lives.
I'm just looking, we got time for maybe a question here. Someone asked about heavy metals. I'll just make a statement about detoxification. These pathways that we've been talking about, specifically the NRF2 pathway, that is the antioxidant gene that activates glutathione. There's some good information about that on amazingmolecules.com. If you'll go down to the bottom, there's some PDF documents on that page and the second page that talk about the antioxidant effect of Asea. And if you'll read through those with a careful reading, you'll learn a little bit about the NRF2 pathway, the NFKB, or the inflammatory pathway, and Asea's ability to affect the inflammatory pathways. And so that's one of the things, if you'll get your bottle out and look at the back side of the bottle, you'll see that we actually are able to list in a bullet point the anti-inflammatory effect of this product. And so the whole point of detoxification is that when the cell is working physiologically as it should, and glutathione is doing what it's supposed to be doing, that's where the detox comes. And in fact, some people, as soon as they start this, they will begin to detox and actually feel worse for a while because their cells are suddenly functioning. That's a good sign. That's a good backdoor validation, that this is really effective, is they will begin to detox. You just kind of have to work your way through that. If you've got issues or concerns, you can speak with a knowledgeable person in your organization, and they can answer or address that, what to do about detoxification. So anyway, we're coming to a close. This has been a great hour for the Asea 5, or I guess this week the Asea 3. Our compatriots are in Dallas at an Asea function there, and we trust that they're enjoying it, but I know they'll have to get this on the rebound, and this will be posted on Asea United, and you can share it with your people that you're working with and so forth. But Chuck, again, thank you for being with us. You've got a great story. It's fun to have you, and most people don't know that you and I are in the same town, so that's kind of fun to work cross-line together.
I kind of a side note, that the doctor you're talking about is my neighbor.
I know.
And I was introducing him to Jerry White and Nancy Turnell, I believe it was, in Salt Lake. And I joked that I'd been talking to him about Asea for about a year. And it wasn't until he kicked his soccer ball over the fence and wanted it back. I told him he had to sign up for Asea or he wasn't getting his ball back. And so it was kind of a little side note. I
am glad that he did. Our life has been blessed because of that, and we've all been blessed with the two of you. So for the Asea 5, we wish everybody well. Next week, we'll be repeating this. You'll get the announcements on who will be a part of that. But we appreciate, we're going to kick this over to the Asea group in Australia. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Dick. And thank you, everybody, for attending. Have a good night.
Take care. Thank you.